Once upon a time, there was a hero, and this hero was a space hero. The evil villain was there too. Oh yeah, he was a clone of the hero. Yeah, that sounds right. And this evil clone wanted to rule the galaxy because he's evil. Oh yeah, and there's pirates. If we don't introduce our story in the proper rhythm, it can feel patchwork together like Dr. Frankenstein went on a bender. So let's plan out our introduction and lay down some beats. I'm DC Fergerson, and this is the Worldbuilding Dojo. As we covered in the last video on endings, going too slow or too fast can leave your audience with the wrong impression. In order to hit the beat correctly, it helps to have a very good idea of where your story is going. I've said it before and I'll say it again, plan ahead. Flying by the seat of your pants or making it up as you go will often lead to continuity errors. And then we paint ourselves into a corner, and then we use Deus Ex Machina to get out of it. It's a disaster. In the planning phases though, let's think about what it is we want to say. Let's not remain intangible here. We're going to get right to examples. For that, let's look at the intro to Back to the Future. The first film starts with us walking through a room covered in clocks. Someone who is either obsessed with time or a hoarder of clocks. Given the title of the film, we can infer the former. Now, as we pan through, we're looking at these inventions, an automatic toaster, an automatic dog feeder, and none of them work right. Then we see a newspaper clippings about Doc Brown's estate going bankrupt. So, without any dialogue, without even seeing a character, we know a great deal about him already. We know Doc is a failed inventor that has squandered his money while being obsessed with time. This is the pinnacle of show, don't tell. Then we have Marty come in, and he can't wait to hook up his guitar to Doc's amp, a giant device, probably of his own making, that sends Marty flying across the room with a sound wave so powerful it destroys the speaker. Another failed invention, and also a small glimpse into Marty. Now, we learned a lot about Doc, but who did we get introduced to first? Our main character, that's who. Probably the best advice I've ever gotten from a writing professor was when one of mine looked at my first novel way back when. He asked me about these characters on display in that first chapter, and he said, "These gods, are they your main character?" I said, "No, that they're the ones that start the hero's journey." He replied, "Well, why aren't you starting there then?" So, we're going to take a look at a few ways that intros can be done, what we're looking to accomplish with our audience, and then we're going to stare at, you guessed it, more charts. We don't often talk about the modern book market, or marketing at all, on the Worldbuilding Dojo. Today, we're just going to touch on it. One of the more difficult parts of the modern book market is to accept that if you're a fan of classic literature like me, most of our favorite books would never get published today. In the current technological culture saturated with advertising and short attention spans, consumers really do judge a book by its cover and very little else these days. We're spoiled by choice. As such, the dry as toast openings of literary giants such as Charles Dickens or F. Scott Fitzgerald would not do very well in the modern book market. The Amazon preview of the first chapter does very little to grab anyone. The answer to this has been a shift in the way that storytelling is done to hook the reader right off the first page. It's not good enough that you need a memorable opening line like, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." A cold open, if you've never heard the term before, is a jump right into the action with no preparation for the audience, no preamble, no prologue, no scrolling text to set the scene. The thing is, this method is incredibly effective. A properly done cold open serves the dual purpose of introducing your character and throwing them into your world. The downside of this method is that your audience is playing catch-up as they're trying to figure out what's going on. This method works very well in action, drama, crime, sci-fi, and horror. It can be adapted to other genres as well, just as easily, but those are the ones that suit it best. You get to dictate the pace of the story right from the get-go. And you've seen this before, you just didn't know what to call it. Now, there are countless cold opens that have been done so well it isn't even funny. Tim Burton's 1989 Batman movie springs to mind for sure. But no, today we're going to use an example that is probably the single best cold open I've ever seen in a film, bar none. And for that example, we're going to look at 2006's Mission Impossible 3. Whether you're a fan of the franchise or not, this intro should be watched as a lesson in doing it right. You'll be hard-pressed not to watch the whole film after this intro. Part of the reason is the opening scene is a flash forward. Our protagonist is cuffed to a chair. Across from him, also tied to a chair, is someone he loves. The villain wants to know where an object is, and he's going to shoot the woman in the chair. The hero is desperate, confused, trying to plead and buy time. All the while, our villain has a gun to the woman's head and is counting to 10. It is tense, uncomfortable, and we want answers. Our hero's bargaining turns to begging, and his cool secret agent facade gets washed away as the villain has found his weak spot. So, in analyzing this intro, we set up a love interest, our hero, our villain. They touch on the plot, though we don't know what it is, and then the film starts at the beginning of the story. Truly, watch this clip on YouTube and see how little world building you need to do in order to hook a story. Then I'll see you again in about 2 hours, because you're going to watch the whole thing. I wish I could say that there are exceptions to the bit I mentioned about the book market, forcing you to hook a reader right away, but there really aren't. The dramas that start with the slow burn, those are the ones that critics adore but nobody pays money to see, and that's the same with writing to some degree. This is especially difficult with genres like drama or high fantasy. These genres often need to explain a whole lot for you to understand what's going on. And let's be honest, there were at least a few characters in Game of Thrones that you saw like 7 or 8 times and didn't remember their names until like the 2nd season. It's for reasons like this that you get the sometimes frustrating juxtaposition of not wanting your audience in the dark, but keeping them intrigued enough that they're hooked. The best way to do that is a natural, organic method of fitting plot points and world building into your dialogue and brief bits of the point of view or narration. Now, we'll be getting into point of view in a future episode, but I'm once again going to use myself as an example here. The Singer and the Charlatan is written in third-person omniscient. That means that the narrator can describe everything that the characters are doing and can tell you how they're feeling by going into their heads. Project Phoenix is written in third-person limited, meaning that the narrator can only speak for the perspective of the main character and no one else. We don't talk about other characters' feelings or inner thoughts at all. Singer, and the rest of the Wicked Instruments series, uses a method of narration with a cheeky narrator, akin to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is where I drew a lot of inspiration from on how to write this book. As such, I feed the reader information about the world as it becomes relevant to where we are in the story. So I use this top-down method here. I start with a generalized statement about the world, expand on its meaning, then how it affects the world, and finally, how it relates to where we're going in the story. Project Phoenix sees the world through Cora Blake's eyes. In this regard, you get the world fed to you via the things she watches on the news, conversations she has, and personal thoughts about her understanding of the world. Using your protagonist as a filter can be especially effective if there's something going on in the world that they don't know, some secret the villain has, or some way that they understood the world that just simply isn't true. The lesson here is that we can have an action-packed intro into a big bad that literally will not affect the outcome of the story for 6 seasons, and still introduce 47 characters into a high fantasy world later. Find your delivery method for how the audience receives world-building information, and then piece it in slowly when it's appropriate. Do not info dump. Going on for 3 pages about the system of government your city has. That's not going to work. Give us only what we need to propel the story forward and clearly understand. Again, we're just trying to be concise. Oh, charts. My lovely, lovely charts. Hold on to your sweet bippies, because this one is a doozy. Telling you how to end a story is about 100 times easier than telling you how to start one. The reason is because so much cooking and brewing goes on behind the scenes before your pen hits the paper, it gets very difficult to point to any one thing and say, this is the most important thing to do. So, what goes into it? Well, I'm so glad you asked. remember all these videos? Yeah, all of them go in the mix. Let's start with one we haven't covered yet, though, and that's perspective. You need to know how you're going to write it before you actually start. So, next up is going to be pace, tone, and setting. Where are we going to be? Are we fast-paced action or slow-burning drama? Then we need to know where we're going, because you have already outlined your work and broke it down like good students at this dojo. Now, without leaving the audience at a total loss for what's going on, how much conflict can we start with to hook the audience and get the ball rolling? Make sure that when we're doing this, it's our main character or one of our main characters that is front and center in this conflict. Now, these types of introductions with their respective conflicts are usually used as a segue to the hero's journey, basically the first rumble of thunder before the storm. So, in this example, Star-Lord picks up the MacGuffin, remember that? And then he gets into a fight with people that don't want him touching the MacGuffin, but he beats them and escapes. This introductory conflict wraps up completely, we get to know who he is, and he's also actually holding the MacGuffin that this whole story's conflict is going to be based around. Yet another element in this mix is another thing that we'll be talking about in more depth in a future video, and that's motivation. What makes your protagonist tick? Why do they do what they do? What drives them? And, as it relates to your story, how does this come into conflict with your antagonist? You tell me in your first chapter that your hero is a sarcastic loudmouth. Okay, why? Is it a defense mechanism to hide insecurity? Is it a coping mechanism to avoid talking about his real feelings? Do they feel the need to be the center of attention? Don't pick a lane because it's cool for them to be a certain way. Choose it because it's natural for the character. So, we have this huge hodgepodge of different ingredients, and now we're going to brew it. Everything you see up on this chart should be something you can comfortably answer as the pen hits the paper. Sure, the actual writing of the character may make you learn more about them that you didn't know, but that's part of the beauty of writing. Now, take me into your world. Show me what is going on, who it's happening to, how they're dealing with it, where we are, and why should I care? You got all that? Because believe me when I tell you, this part, it does get easier, but it's always the hardest part of every book I've ever written. And I have 7 books published, and 9 I've written total. Your introduction is so crucial to get and keep your audience that a disproportionate amount of time should actually be spent sharpening it to a razor's edge. Always make sure to put your best foot forward and show me how cool your world is. So, this week's episode took a hot minute to come out, but there's a reason. Book 3 of the Dragon's Dream Saga, the Pendragon Codex, comes out March 25th. I can't even tell you how excited I am to get this into everybody's hands. Speaking of which, I do have a special offer for anyone that's interested. Between now and March 31st, I have a very limited number of review copies of The Singer and the Charlatan and Project Phoenix available from Booksprout. That means you get the ebook 100% free, provided you sign up for the site and agree to post an honest review. I really do need more reviews on both of these books, so the links are in the description below if you want to help out and get started with any of my series for free. I also want to give a special shout out to subscriber Fred Doolin Burke for suggesting this week's topic. If you have an idea or something that you'd like to see me cover on future episodes, please feel free to leave a comment. I try to reply to everybody. Down in the description box, you'll also find links to my mailing list and all of my books. You can sign up for my newsletter and get all the latest goings-on with the Dragon's Dream Saga. Help out the Master of Kung Fu and Friendship by hitting that like and subscribe button to hear about new videos. And as always, I'm DC Fergerson. Now have fun and get crafting.